As many of you, I've just discovered that there are probably a lot of Helix pedal boards out there with broken foot pedals. It all stems around the fact that it rotates over a pivot point here. However, the way the pivot point's been done is really kind of weak. My guess is the designer that designed the casing for this was not a guitar player. Technically, it's perfectly fine, but in reality, you get some guy stomping on the pedal on stage, it's going to fail, and it's just a matter of time. Let's take a look at how to fix this thing. It's actually pretty easy. So just by taking out a bunch of screws in the back and some hex head screws on the side panels, you can take the cover right off the back, and you'll see how the pedal is attached. There's a bracket that basically snaps off. The reason for this is because this angled bracket right here that holds the axle for the foot pedal was originally this piece down here. So it's just be cut out of one sheet of metal and folded up to make two independent axle points. So as a result, where it mounts is this very tiny piece right here on either side. And I've now got 3 out of 4 broken. That one's broken through, and at the front end, it is not broken yet. But you can be sure one thing. There's metal fatigue there, and it would be the next to go. And if I just wiggle it, several more times, yeah, it'll probably snap off, but I don't have time for that. So what we're gonna do first is just take out the axle, which is done by removing the Allen head screw right here. One thing about this assembly right here, basically it's got nylon washers and then a locker that prevents the nut on the backside from turning so that you can actually adjust everything from this one Allen key without having the other end spin. The reason for that is so you can access it through a hole in the side of the case and adjust the tension of the foot pedal just by tightening or loosening this. There's where the problem started. When I first got the Line 6, that was fairly tight, so the pedal was always rather stiff. I didn't mind it, but I didn't expect that it was gonna cause it to fail. Because it was fairly tight, there would always be stress on the body whenever the foot pedal was rotated. If I would have, on a new Line 6, just backed this off to make it more silky smooth as far as the pedal action, probably never would have broken, but it was shipped that way, and I just didn't bother to tune it in. So in essence, that's the cause of the problem. So before making a new piece, I got to take a couple measurements here. So I'm going to measure the distance between the old and the new part. Basically 2.5 inches, just about dead on. You've got that kind of clearance inside, so we could be up fairly high and still going to clear. So we're going to make a little U-bracket that we're going to attach in place of those 2 broken arms. So I've pulled out the pin, the axle. You can see this part here. It's really fatigued right now. Bend it pretty easily. Couple bends, and it's out of my way. Done. There's the other half. So print out a picture of this. This is the order that the parts came out. So as I took it apart, the nut came loose first, then the retaining clip, steel washer, nylon washer. There's the broken left part of the bracket, the thick washer, a bigger steel washer, the axle in the middle, another steel washer, now just reverses, steel washer, thick nylon washer, the other broken part, thin nylon washer, thin steel washer, and then the bolt that goes right through the end from the outside in. I'm going to use a piece of scrap metal to replace the broken part, so checking the thickness, 0.06 inches thick. So all I have to do is find a piece of metal like that. As it turns out, I found a rack bracket off of some piece of gear that I'm not using anymore. And I check it, and it is 0.85 inches. Yeah, 0.08 inches. So it's a bit thicker, but it doesn't really matter because there's enough clearance there to make it work. Nice thing is, height-wise, it's just about the same height as the original was. So it's very close to fitting. I'm going to drill new holes anyway, so it doesn't matter. As long as it's taller and thicker, this thing will be stronger than the Helix itself. So next I'm going to take the foot pedal assembly right out. For that, I need to bend this just a bit. It's soft metal that reflects off the optical sensors to determine volume. And just weasel that out of there. So now it's out. Got a piece of metal that I just dropped in the vise after marking it, and hit it with a hammer until I got it square. You know, I can be pretty crude on this stuff. No one's going to see it anyway. And its inside measure winds up being just a fraction around 2.5 inches as we need. So that guy's going to go in there. Now, instead of having two little pieces like that, we've got this one massive, substantial piece to act as a support for the foot pedal. One thing to note, one leg is higher than the other. That doesn't matter, there's still enough room in there to clear it. If not, I can just trim it. Oh, just so close. I think I'll just trim that off with a jigsaw later, just before I install it. Next, I'm gonna drill holes at the same height as the original holes were, so when I drop this in position, it will be in the right spot. Now this was set down inside, so it's a little bit lower. So really the holes can be more like right there. It can be set, if you wanted the pedal a bit higher, a bit lower, you can change it marginally to get that to fit. And measured from the bottom of the plate, bottom of the new bracket, looks like I'm going to drill exactly 1/2 inch up from the bottom on the outside. Spend about $8 and buy some brand new drill bits to do this, ones that won't skate around on you. I drilled 2 holes in this process, just one to sort of make sure I'm lined up right. It was just under 1/8 of an inch or something small. Then I'm using a 1/4 inch drill bit to make the actual hole that I need. So once I have my hole drilled, I'm going to measure it because I have to duplicate it on the other side. I want it to be exactly 7/8 of an inch from that back and exactly 1/2 inch from the bottom. So on the other end, I'm going to go exactly 7/8 of an inch. And exactly 1/2 an inch from the bottom. That gives me my mark for the second hole. So now my bracket's halfway done. Put the pin through to see how it's working. So what I'm going to be doing is mounting this in here to become the new part. I just have to make sure I don't cover that hole, which is required for the encoder arm to fit through. So I don't know where this is going yet. I'll adjust that later. What I want to do first though is get some holes so that when I put it in position, I just have to mark through, and then I know where to drill the chassis of the line 6. Now that I've masked off the area, I'm going to take the old bracket and just set it back in there and line it up to where it was. Basically just so I can figure out where the center line was for the axle, which is about there. This piece used to be mounted like that before it broke out. So basically, I just want to make sure I'm relatively lined up there. So about like that. Okay, I'm just going to ruler it. And then I'll check my measurements to make sure that's basically centered. Otherwise, your pedal is going to look a little twisted in the hole. It'll still work fine, it'll just look a little twisted. So now I've reinstalled temporarily the outer washers and the inner axle, which is going to basically line everything up. The other stuff doesn't matter at this point. I want to make sure that the bolt lines up with my line on both sides. That's pretty good. Looks fairly square. Just going to mark my pre-drilled holes. So now I know where to drill. Here's the point where you're actually going to drill into your line 6 helix. So you want to make sure that you mask off the area so that any of the metal filings as you drill don't get onto the electronic circuitry, or your helix is a doorstop. So I've drilled my holes using not too fast a speed on the drill. I'm basically just going to tip it up and get all the garbage off to the downhole side. The tape will pretty much take all of the bits with it, but make sure they all fall outside rather than inside the unit. So now that it's all been cleaned out, a vacuum is also good for this. There was a piece of plastic that was covering the holes that were cut originally, and it's sticky on the backside, so it's collected some of the shaving, so we want to just get rid of that as well. It's not really needed, it's just covering a hole, so we'll just basically use a piece of duct tape or gaff tape to cover that hole in the future. So there's the new bracket, bolted in place, no nuts because I tapped the bracket instead of using nuts. If I find it gets loose later, I'll just put lock nuts on the back and it'll be all good. The hardest part will be threading all the parts back on the long bolt. You need probably a second person to hold it for you so you can stack them vertically so they're not all falling apart. Then we just snug up the adjuster and we bend back the part I bent out of the way earlier so it would go through the hole. And basically, there she is, ready to go. And actually, that's just the right amount of tension too. I don't think I want to adjust that anymore. And the nice thing is, it's stronger than the original product is. So good luck with that. It's not that hard, and hopefully saves you $1,500 from buying a new Helix. Take care.